You now.
Good morning, everybody. This is Casey and KW with the Casey and KW Show. We're delayed just a few minutes this morning. I apologize for that, but it's exciting news. KW has returned from his 2 weeks, just about 2 weeks in Arizona at the border, and he's going to be here to update us, or he is here already, to update us about his trip out there. So he just flew in on the red eye, so we're starting a few minutes late, but it's going to be a really good show. We're certainly going to start out with the immigration border crisis, and there's a lot of things to talk about today. You know, should we have a vaccine passport and mask mandates and all that good stuff? So, KW, it is good to have you back. You were gone last week in Arizona and just came in overnight.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me back, Casey. I feel like I'm back in civilization now.
Well, welcome back. We're glad to have you. Folks, we're airing here from the shores of the St. Lucie Shore in Stuart, Florida. We're South Florida guys and women, and but these things impact the entire United States. So we're really happy that KW, you took the time on your own time and expense to go out and share with us what's going on at the border crisis, because there's a lot happening, a lot of sad stories coming out of there and scary stories.
Yeah.
So KW, tell us a little bit about it.
Well, look, clearly the border crisis is a headline news item across all media today, and outside of the humanitarian crisis, Casey, what we were hearing from the back channels was the real issue that is facing America, and the real risk we're facing, is the accelerated commercial drug imports, okay, and the fact that the open borders, primarily in Arizona, are essentially a Wild West for terrorists walking through our onto our shores.
Right.
And so rather than go down to Texas or California, where you have more of the humanitarian crisis with the women and children, we really wanted to focus on the hard-hitting issue of really the hard drugs and the terrorists that are coming through, because people are starting to ask questions. Well, after 9/11 and after all of these wars we engaged in, are we any safer as a nation?
Right.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that today, because the facts that we uncovered are very disturbing. So,
That's right.
In any event, great to be back.
Yes.
We were in the bush, and literally Arizona is the bush, as we call it.
Right.
From overseas, it's rugged territory and it's wide open.
Well, KW, it is good to have you back, and you had shared some videos throughout the week, some live videos. I know you were also concerned about your safety, as the folks are out there, because you don't know who's coming over the border and how they're armed.
That's right.
There was a story, it just came up, and I'll share it here real quick. Smugglers throw a 6-month-old girl into the river near the U.S.-Mexico border. This, folks, is what's going on out there, because this border is open. The baby's mother paid something like $3,500 to cross the border. The smugglers attacked her, broke her leg, and then threw her 6-month-old baby into the river. And our CBP, our wonderful officers, did rescue that baby and the mother. But this is dangerous. And, having this open border is creating these types of situations. And that's just one that caught my heart as a mother. There's over 17,000 migrant children that are in our custody at the border right now as of Sunday. So this is a humanitarian crisis and also a safety crisis for the United States.
Absolutely. No, it's frankly a catastrophe. I can only speak for myself, but my career, having worked in some really difficult places around the world, frankly, I've never seen it this bad in some of the emerging market countries. When you really look at what's happening at the border on the four states.
This is sad. This is our country. This is what's so sad about it.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, humanitarian. We've got absolute wholesale, unabated drug cart smuggling. We've got terrorists coming across the border. We just in the one sector that really worked on the Arizona border, about 10 or 12 miles, which we're going to talk about in a minute when we show a video clip here. The known interdiction was 27 different nationalities that were captured.
Wow.
27 different nationalities. Those are the ones that were caught. Think about the ones that aren't caught, which is pretty much almost that. The capture rate is maybe 5%, 10%.
Right.
So
right.
Most of them are never caught. So if you think about it, if we caught 27 different nationalities coming across the border, think about what got through.
That's right. We don't know, do we?
We don't know.
I mean, last week I had mentioned that there was Iranians that were caught crossing the border.
That's right. Syrians before that. The reality is the bad actors from around the world know our borders are open, know our government's weak, know we're an affable nation, know that we're essentially sleeping at the wheel, and it's not fiction, it's fact. And that's why I went down there, to make sure we wake up the American people, to show them what's real.
Right.
Okay, not talk about it, not watch CNN or Fox or whatever station you watch. Show you what's happening on the border directly and see it for our own eyes.
And KW, it's so frightening to me and to so many people, because you think about 911. Terrorists, they hate us. They absolutely hate us, and they will look for any way to come and attack America, attack our ways, attack our people. And, opening these borders up is just so frightening to me. I can't believe the leader of our country has allowed this to happen. And he has, and who knows what they're planning now. KW, I mean, tell us a little bit more about it. You do have a lot of meetings that you had this
Right.
past 2 weeks.
Well, look, the reality is, it's okay. Here's the reality. It's not just okay. We have an office of the president. That person has limited capabilities and limited powers. But the reality is that this particular president did sign an executive order. Biden signed an executive order. The reality, though, behind that is every single one of the federal agencies is culpable and guilty of allowing terrorist drugs and essentially violating all of our federal statutes. And our federal statutes state that if you aid, abet, or support or encourage anyone to illegally cross the border, you will go to prison. It's federal time. It's a statutory federal code. It's codified. The problem is it's not being enforced. It's being completely violated. And it's criminal. I'm going to tell you right now, the U.S. government, and I say this with all seriousness, is absolutely operating in a criminal behavior. They're promoting human trafficking. They're promoting prostitution. They're promoting
Drugs.
slavery and indenture. They're promoting drug trafficking. And then, more importantly, and the most important thing for the American people, is they're promoting terrorists openly, freely, willfully coming across our border, and we don't know where they're going. There's no tracking. We don't know who they are, where they're from, and what they're going to do. And if that doesn't scare the hell out of every American, I don't know what does.
And it sure should. Just the fact that they think the borders are open has encouraged all of these activities, the human trafficking, the drug cartels. KW, there's over 17,000 migrant children in the U.S. government custody right now. What's going to become of these kids?
Okay, so let's talk about the kids for a minute. There are really two models that are being played out here with we'll call it the traffickers. One is the teenage children from 12 up, okay, boys and girls. The girls will become prostitutes and indentured servants, okay, to the drug cartels in the U.S. They're here. The people don't realize. They think that these kids will come over and just find some church to take them in, and then they'll just go to school and they'll live. That's not the case.
The drug cartel has a system here already
The
set
drug
up.
cartel has an established system here. These kids are documented. They are tagged. They have, they know exactly what to do with them. So the females are going to be basically put into indenture, either servants, prostitution rings mostly, and they're going to become slave laborers. The boys are basically tagged for drug muling and gangs. Okay. Now there might be a few that'll slip through the cracks, but they came over by absolute control of the drug cartels. Okay.
Right.
They didn't slip through the border just coming over with a church group. They were basically tagged, labeled, and documented by the drug cartels, which means their family will get killed if they don't, the teenage boys, they know that their mother, their father, or somebody in their family back home,
Right.
the drug cartels will kill them if they don't cooperate and show up where they need to show up. The smaller children who have no control will just be put into hands of caretakers, AKA the drug syndicate, caretakers.
Right.
So they're not going to good homes. They're not going to, utopia. These kids are going into, indentureness.
Right.
For lack of better terms.
And it's so sad. And I bring up that case I talked about earlier where the mother, the smugglers broke her legs and threw her baby
Yeah.
into the river. She paid $3,500. There were 68 adults and 151 children crossing on the river that time. Do you imagine how much money? This is a big business for them down
Yeah,
there.
it's a big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business when you put it all together. Essentially, the drug cartels, have become, the Mexican drug cartels have become like the facilitators for the world, okay? Because, they basically sit on the back door of America, okay,
right.
on our 4 border states. And essentially, if you want to get anything into the United States, you just go through them. Whatever it is, whether it's drugs, terrorists, human trafficking, you name it. I mean, whatever you want, they basically are open for business. So they're the facilitators for bad activities for the world. And pushing it into the United States.
And our
the
policy,
U.S. government,
right? Our policy is
complicit.
allowing this. It's encouraging it.
It's not even allowing it; it's encouraging it. You're right, Tacey. It's an absolute encouragement. It's criminal. So I want to restate: the U.S. government is engaging in criminal activity. It's just a fact. If you look at the U.S. Federal Code, okay, and you look at what's happening, it's an absolute criminal act. Technically, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and any federal official could be put in prison for what they're promoting. But of course, we don't enforce our laws in the United States. Only, the small person, only the non-politically connected get prosecuted for political purposes. Anybody else can basically break the federal code openly and willingly, and there's no repercussions.
You have a video that you wanted to share with us. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so we obviously we did a lot of interviews on the border and in the center and interior of Arizona, but this one clip is with one of the old family ranchers in Arizona. They own 16,000 acres, 10 miles on the border. Okay. So John Ladd. And John is a patriot. John's a conservative, but more importantly, he's an American. Okay. And he and his father and his family have been dealing with this for over 30 years because they're cattle ranchers. And back in the day, as you see, John will tell us, it was just cattle intrusion, the cattle wandering across the border. Well, that's now escalated into an absolute criminal syndicate. And so I think what John has to say is probably very important for what most Americans are thinking. So maybe that's a good segue to let's play the clip. Let's let everybody watch it, and then we can do some Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you, Iggy. If you can play that clip.
Torch the bars, 1 or 2 of them, and just push people through. And if you don't have the backside monitoring, the wall is somewhat
We're
useless.
queuing that click up just a second.
Yeah, and that's the sad part about it, because it works if you have the manpower and support. You're right on with that. And we've seen one agent drive by us.
One agent.
See that? America doesn't. They think we're just swarming up here with Border Patrol, and that's the fallacy.
Well, that's what I want to talk to everybody about as well. That's why I'm here in Arizona. I'm not in Texas. I'm not in New Mexico. I'm not in California. I knew that this was a hot spot from a standpoint of risk to our infrastructure and our assets from a terrorist perspective. This is where I would come through. This is where the security assessment says come through. Okay, it says put the people and the women and children, flood the border there in Texas and other areas, and make the Border Patrol flood and surround that. Move the bad actors through Arizona.
KW show.
I'm not saying
You'll see it
I'm not trying to put
live.
it all in
Please switch
Arizona,
over.
but that's the risk assessment results.
And politically, Arizona has no clout in Washington.
Well, that's what I want to talk
I mean,
about.
that's a fact.
Well, that's a sad state of affairs because it has nothing to do with whether Arizona has clout or not. It's a state, and we need to protect our sovereign borders.
We agree with that. But
Yeah.
for 30 years, that's when my dad and I got involved in this 30 years ago. And there were some very high-powered politicians that laughed at us because they said Arizona means nothing
Well,
in
and so
the big picture in Washington.
well, let's talk about that because what we're getting down to now, John, is the sovereignty of the United States.
Sure.
Okay, we have 4 border states, right? California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Okay. What's the purpose of a U.S. passport? What's the purpose of U.S. citizenship? What's the purpose of having a sovereign nation if you have an open border, a porous border, that not only can economic refugees come across, but terrorist-linked organizations that can basically move into this country at will, especially after everything we went through at 9/11 and all of the subsequent wars we entered into to basically try to address why 9/11 occurred, right? Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, in other locations. We're fighting covert wars in Africa right now. We're in Somalia. We're in Kenya. Our special operations people are all over the place. We're in Nigeria supporting the Nigerian government fighting Boko Haram. But if those bad actors can put people over here and bring them across the U.S. to attack us, why are we over there fighting in their country when we should be mobilizing and securing our own sovereign borders?
It's a shell game to control the energy trade.
And there you have it, folks, because that's really what we're going down to. Why are our energy assets being put at risk in our industrial base? Because the government wants these borders open for a reason. It's not for humanitarian purposes. It's creating volatility, and it's a sad state of affairs. And I know, John, that bothers you. It bothers me. But the more that we leave these borders porous, the more volatility we have in the U.S. And I think that's creating a real problem. And you know, one of the sensitive parts to me, John, is our pipelines and infrastructure. Now, when the Biden-Harris administration came in, Biden basically signed an executive order shutting down not just the XL pipeline, but other pipelines that were under construction across the U.S. Northwest borders.
Yep.
Now, if we don't have pipelines and transportation and distribution systems, what do you think that's going to do to our energy infrastructure in the U.S.? And what's going to
It's going to be unaffordable. The economy's going to shut down immediately. When you get to $6 gallon diesel, what are you going to do?
Well, that's a good question, right? So we already know that unleaded gas in California is already at $6, or very close to $6. So when you get to $6 in diesel with the truckers, the transportation, and just ranchers like yourself who have you need to move equipment and just tractors and everything, that's almost crippling to the economy.
Absolutely.
And that's a problem. I think America needs to understand is our energy independence is at risk here. So why are we here talking about energy at the border? Because we have bad actors coming across that will attack our infrastructure, that will seek to attack our borders. And that's something I want everybody to be aware of. John is a patriot. John's done a great job. He's worked with the Border Patrol, worked with immigration. Is there anybody you haven't worked with, John?
No. Well, I haven't worked with Biden yet.
I don't think anybody's working with Biden. I mean, he would have to wake up first.
Right.
So look, this is a very, very serious event for the U.S. And people across the country don't realize what's here, right? So I knew that the only way that we could get this message across is to come down here and not do a political press briefing, but to come down and talk to someone like you on the wall, to see the assets, to see what's missing, and to really grasp the gaps in the system. And I think I've got that now, and I think you've done a great job of, number one, helping to facilitate our border protection. Number two, helping to facilitate backstopping when they come across. But more importantly, bringing awareness to this, because this is about educating the American people.
Oh, you bet.
If we don't educate the American people on this, they go to sleep on it, and they think it's an Arizona problem, it's a Texas problem, New Mexico problem. Well, they think California's crazy, so they don't really.
Well, I do too.
I do too. But if people need to understand that this is going to come to a city or town near you, and that's what I'm focused on. So my friends in the energy business who are up in North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Texas, folks, this is coming to you because the bad actors are coming through here and they're coming for our assets. They're not coming to do good things. And even if they don't come after our heavy assets, they're coming after humanitarian targets. And when bad things happen, we're all going to sit back and we're going to say, how did they get through? Okay, well, they didn't come through Boston. They didn't come through JFK. They didn't come through New York or Atlanta. They came through the southern border. And by the way, we let it happen.
You bet it is. It's all over. I don't want to be a racist. I don't want to be a bigot. I'm going to be very tolerant of these people that move in next door to me that don't speak English and ruin my schools and the hospital care. And we have other languages at our supermarket because we're so tolerant. Right. If you love America, you can get here legally. We do need the workers.
Yes, we do.
But quit being tolerant. If you want the America that you love, you better wake up.
Well, that's a good point. What do you think about the social cost that this is going to put on the Americans? This social cost is not going to be put on Arizona residents. It's going to be put on every American via taxes.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, do you think that the American people understand how bad that's going to be, John? How big of a tax hike that's coming?
Well, sure. How many trillions is this going to cost, and how many stimulus checks you want? We're already broke.
Yeah.
And the
30 trillion.
Immigration
30 trillion.
has caused a lot of our money problems. We have over $250 million of infrastructure on our 10.5 miles.
On your 10.5 miles of okay.
And so put it in perspective.
Yeah.
And we don't have all the good stuff either.
No.
The magnitude of money, you throw money at it and make everybody think we're doing it, and it isn't happening.
Well, this reminds me, I worked overseas my whole career for the most part, and I've worked a lot in Africa. This reminds me of what I call a classic African project.
Yeah.
Half built, half ass, okay? Yeah. Not that the metal's not good, not that the construction workers weren't good. They didn't finish the project,
right.
Okay? Because it's only as good as the complete integrated system.
That's right.
So, yeah, we put a wall up, and we have gaps in some places. They acetylene torch it every day, and you got to go repair it. But the reality is, they're getting through.
Yep.
And so we spent all this money Then we're wasting money by basically paying contractors not to work because they have guaranteed contracts.
There you go.
And Biden is basically wasting taxpayer money there. But then we're not solving the problem, which is trying to curtail the bad actors and the drugs from coming through. And that's really what I'm focused on, and I know you are too, because women and children are one thing. Terrorists and heavy drugs, fentanyl, for example. For those that don't understand, fentanyl is a Chinese-driven drug cartel. It's not driven by the Mexicans or the Colombians. Fentanyl is driven by the Chinese Communist Party. They run that trade globally, and they have a deal with the drug cartels on the other side of the border to move it into the U.S. They profit share. So when we talk about the drugs, we're not talking about marijuana. We're not talking about alcohol. We're talking about fentanyl, which is a killer, and very small doses kill thousands and thousands of American youth every year.
And it's cheap too.
And it's cheap, right?
There's so much of it. People don't understand supply and demand. Heroin and marijuana are the same price now, and fentanyl is cheaper than both of them.
And fentanyl is the killer.
That's it.
Okay, fentanyl is at a small dose can kill a lot of people, and I need everybody to wake up because it's coming through this border, it's coming through all of the border states, but we have heavy duty, paramilitary drug cartels on the other side of this border, and that's what we're really facing, folks. So we want you to understand that this is not just about humanitarian. I want to go back to your points, John. This is not humanitarian.
Right.
What is it? Give it to us in your words. Say it again.
Taking over America.
And why are they? Because why? Why is it happening in your opinion?
Well, if you go back 30 years ago, the North American Alliance, one world nation, Mexico, U.S., Canada, be one big happy country.
Right. That was the idea.
Yeah.
That was the concept, right? All
but
open
now,
trade.
Now, when you look at the energy, and especially oil,
That's right.
it's global.
It's global. Yeah.
And America, we've had the rhetoric that we're a strong country and sticking up for it, but the green movement, the socialists, they're wanting to take over America.
Well, it comes down to taxes.
Well,
okay?
sure.
It comes down to basically creating a massive national debt that we can't sustain. We're already at 30 trillion.
Yeah.
Okay, with the new 1.9 trillion plus another 3 trillion that they're proposing for infrastructure, which is really another handout, which is also a tax bill at the same time. So NAFTA was an absolute failure, in my opinion. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, and Trump got it.
Right.
It didn't perfect, but it's a lot better than that.
Right. So we've cleaned up NAFTA at least to a certain degree. We hope we don't have to go back there. And then so we're coming down to basically now a socialistic model, and that's really what I want to wrap up with you on, John. When we look at what's really happening here, what is your view of what's happening from the country's perspective on socialism? And everybody can come in and have health care, can have school, can have food. I mean, we have veterans on the street.
Oh, yeah.
We have American citizens sleeping, in cardboard boxes.
Sure.
I mean, how can we basically justify paying millions of dollars a day for illegal immigrants, just even if they're good humanitarian immigrants for economic reasons, not bad actors? How can we justify that as a nation when we have people starving on the street that are here today, that are citizens?
Well, the conservative part of America is still the majority, but it's a silent majority. What needs to happen, they need to be vocal.
Yeah.
We've got the radical environmentalists are right behind all this.
Yes, they are. Well, they're tied together.
Sure.
Yeah.
But what I'll leave you with is Republicans want cheap labor, Democrats want cheap votes, America wants cheap tomatoes.
There you go.
That's why they keep their mouth shut.
So essentially, the way I phrase it for my audience is they all feed from the same trough.
Sure.
Okay, so folks, while I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I know John is as well, the reality is here we have leadership in the Republican Party who is really liberal, because at the end of the day, they take the same money and the same talking points and the same marching orders as the liberal, the leftist, and the Democrats, which are Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy. Most people don't talk about the fact that Kevin McCarthy's from California, agricultural area. Guess what they need? Cheap labor.
Yeah.
Okay, they all want cheap labor, right? And you're right. Americans want cheap produce and cheap food.
Sure.
If you want it, we need to protect it, just like we need to protect our energy industry. So,
Well, I'm not.
no, please.
25 years ago, when I first got involved with Border Patrol, and it started over cattle, trespassing
Right.
Mexican cattle.
Back and forth, yeah.
Well, they had a prison psychologist come down. Border Patrol set it up. Well, what the hell is this? One of the first meetings I went to. Why do we want a prison psychologist? 25 years ago, we had one of the grade schools down here. She said, "Here's what's going to happen. These people are coming. America's tolerance is going. Oh, we're welcoming. We
Right.
need cheap labor. She said, well, what's going to happen is they're going to take over your city government. They're going to take over your county government. They're going to take over your state government. They're going to take over at Washington.
That's where it starts.
And here we are.
And that's where it starts. It starts locally.
Just
and,
because
and
we're being nice.
well, it's not just that, but you tie that with the George Soros linked foundations who have billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. And what they do is they fund district attorney races, they fund judges, they fund state attorneys, and they've basically taken over the local governments and jurisdiction that way. And look at what's happening in California, right? They're doing it all across the nation. They're basically putting in these liberal leftist district attorneys, state attorneys, and judges who are basically usurping federal law and state law.
Yeah.
And until people wake up to this fact, we're going to be fighting this for forever. Hey, let's leave the viewers on a funny note. Tell us about these rocks behind you, John. This is something I thought was interesting.
Well, this is Border Patrol technology at its finest. This is individual agents come up here. We put these rocks here. If they get these gates open, that rock's going to be on the ground the next time he comes and checks it. That's how he's looking.
So he's looking for the rocks.
There you go.
Okay. Hey, folks, you can't make this stuff up, but let me tell you something. I really appreciate John Ladd's time. He's a patriot. He's obviously worked heavily with our government, state, federal agencies. John, you're a conservative. Clearly, we're not against immigration. I know you're not, but we need to do it the right way. We have hundreds of thousands of people waiting in line to come in the right way. We can't bring them in the back door and expect our country to be safe because bad actors come in with them. Okay,
Okay.
so we're gonna let John go. We want to tell you we're here at the Arizona border, right here. What about 10 miles south of Naco or 7 miles?
Yeah.
7 miles from the Naco border control point, and we'll give you more update. But we wanted to tell you live what's happening, and the fact that you spend 10 plus $20 million on gates, and the drug cartels might get the keys when you finish. How does that sit with you folks? You tell me. Send us a note. This is KW Miller, America First, with John Ladd. Thank you very much.
Okay, so everybody, that was basically a short clip from America's first visit to the Arizona border. And again, it's better that the American people hear it directly from the ground, from people like John Ladd. Their family has owned that land for over 100 years. 16,000 acres, over 10.5 miles on the Arizona-Mexico border. There's nothing he hasn't seen, his family haven't seen, and when you hear it directly like that, you know that the problems that we're facing are real, they're serious, and they are damaging the very fabric of our country. Casey, I walked away from the Arizona trip somewhat what's the word I want to put? Not depressed, but it was surreal because I'm an optimist. I always think that we can keep
Right.
America great. We can always do better. We can always overcome. But based on what I'm seeing, it's a complete capitulation, and that's the difference. It's not like we're trying to essentially find a way to solve this. It's like the essentially our government has just basically gone the other way, given up and basically encouraging everything that's against our Constitution, our fabric of a way of life.
Well, John Ladd said it very well. The Republicans want cheap labor and the Democrats want cheap votes. So here we are. We don't have anybody on the other side fighting it strongly like we need to, like President Trump did. I noticed that fence you were standing in front of. Tell us a little bit about that fence. How far did it go, and does it work?
Well, I mean, okay. So here's the thing, right? From an architectural perspective, it's not the prettiest thing you've ever seen, but from a engineering perspective, it's solid. But that particular fence is part of the new border wall that was built during the Trump administration, 18 feet. Heavy concrete, heavy corrugated steel, etc. And a couple things to note. One is the fence is, while it looks like it's completed, all of the supporting infrastructure is incomplete. All of the lighting, all of the electronic surveillance, all of the other supporting mechanisms, and more importantly, all of the manpower has been depleted.
Biden with executive order stuff
By
that
Biden
day one.
administration, by Homeland Security, by all of the, by Border Patrol itself. So, a wall is only as good as the supporting technology and personnel. You can build a wall, but at the end of the day, what happens there is, as John pointed out, we went by miles and miles of wall, and every few hundred yards you would see where they've had to repair, because even with the new wall, the cartels cut it every single day. okay, with acetylene torches. They're commercial. These are professional people. These cartels have billions and billions of dollars. They employ teams to cut the wall, and they run right through. And I said, well, John, do they run through during the daytime or night? He goes, they run through 24/7.
Wow.
Okay, because it's wide open.
So, Iggy, I have another clip I would like to play, and for KW as well. It's our friend up in Washington, D.C., and I say that tongue-in-cheek, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She said there really isn't a border crisis, there isn't a surge. And, I'd like you to hear, it's a short 45-second clip.
Yeah.
Give me some feedback
Sure.
on this.
They want to say, what about the surge? Well, first of all, just gut check, stop. Anyone who's using the term surge around you consciously is trying to invoke a militaristic frame. And that's a problem because this is not a surge. These are children and they are not insurgents and we are not being invaded, which, by the way, is a white supremacist idea, philosophy. The idea that if an other is coming in the population, that this is like an invasion of who we are.
So that's your
Right.
Democratic liberal leader
Right.
speaking to her constituents.
Well, let me reiterate or rephrase or confirm what the Lieutenant Governor of Texas said. Ocasio-Cortez is basically an idiot.
Yes.
It is an invasion because I can tell you what's happening is this is a strategic attack on the U.S. border. Essentially what's happening is the drug cartels are pushing all of the humanitarian crisis into the Texas Rio Grande area on purpose to flood that. It's an overwhelming assault on the border to basically take all of the allocated resources, which are very thin today due to the Biden-Harris administration. They've really stripped the border patrol and of its capabilities. And so they've basically become social workers in Texas. And then at the same time, they're assaulting the border with drugs and terrorists, and it is an absolute all-out blitz, okay, in Arizona. So it's a strategic play. They're basically assaulting, or essentially surging Texas with the humanitarian side to overwhelm us, and then they're pushing all of the real bad activities through the Arizona border, which is really porous and mountainous and rugged terrain and very thinly staffed. So it is essentially an invasion of the U.S. sovereignty. And you can call it what you will, but the reality is, Casey, it's 100% illegal activity that's being promoted, promulgated, and encouraged by our federal government. And if people don't understand that and can't wake up to that fact, and then here's the thing I'll leave you with on that point. People are going to do a postmortem the next time a building gets blown up, and they're going to say, well, how did this happen? Where did this terrorist come from? And what they're going to find, Casey, is that terrorist came through the southern border.
That's right. That's
That's
our
what
Achilles
they're
heel.
gonna find.
That is our Achilles heel. Whit Charlton, thanks for tuning in. Again, this is KC and KW. We're coming to you from South Florida. Join the conversation here on the Facebook Live video. Whit says there has to be laws in place to either let the American people take care of this problem or the military automatically have to take care of the problem and take it out of Biden's hands. And, there are laws in place. We're just ignoring them, right, KW?
They're absolutely blatantly ignored. In fact, I've got a comment from one of my former colleagues in South Africa here, security expert. And everything starts around detect, deter, and defend. You're correct around your statement. However, what you have to believe the way forward in this new open border policy, if you look to Africa specifically, and South Africa, it has caused chaos. Okay, when we opened the borders to Mozambique, we basically encouraged poaching and terrorism. Now that's coming from a security expert in South Africa when they opened the borders and dropped the fences along the Mozambique border. And that basically allowed all the terrorists in, they got poaching, of course, which is criminal activity, which is all, criminal activity is criminal activity, whether it's drugs, whether you're smuggling animal, hides and horns and rhino
girls.
and children and girls.
Right.
So the reality is, when you open your borders, you're encouraging bad actions and you're encouraging serious issues for your country.
And then you're blindly doing it, as AOC is stating, this isn't a crisis. It's just children trying to cross the border. Oh, no, it isn't. This is very serious for America.
Very serious.
Very serious security issue. Chris Woods, flooding Texas with new voters and to turn it blue. He's absolutely right.
Well, I mean, again, we go back to the other issue, which is how many illegal aliens are actually in the country today? Well, the reality is, if you look at the past 30 years, there was a tremendous amount of, the initial surge was always Mexican for the most part. Then the second surge became Central America, Latin America, okay, down south. So we already have 20 million plus illegal Mexican nationals in the country. It's a fact. It's just the government won't admit it. Then we've got about 10, they say on the low side 10, high side 20, of Central American and other nationalities. So let's say 40. That's the number that they talk about in Arizona, KC. 40 million illegal immigrants in the country already. The government doesn't want to tell you this, okay? This is the reality. And now we're going to look at another 5 to 10 with this next round. Okay, so you're talking 40 to 50 million illegal aliens in the country. What do you think the Democrat plan for those illegal aliens is?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a lot of things. Terrorism is one thing. Drug smuggling is another.
And the voter base.
Voter base.
And voter base.
Of course.
Okay, they're looking for cheap votes. John Ladd had it right. And it's great to hear from somebody like him who has credibility and can speak to it.
He's living it.
He's living it every day, and he can sit there and he's tied into the Border Patrol. They won't talk on the record, but obviously they have to talk to him because it's his land.
Right.
And when he says 27 different nationalities have been interdicted, okay, we know the interdiction rate is maybe 10%. Okay, in that particular region because it's so porous. So what do you think, what has really come through that we don't know about?
The other 90%, and who are they? And you think about, even young children that are being smuggled in, they may be raised in families. We don't know what they're going to be raised to do, what they're going to be taught to do right inside our borders. We're talking about just giving, citizenships away for, young children. You don't know these kids that are being brought over through the border today, what family they're being placed into, what they're being taught. You talk about homegrown terrorists. That's
right.
A great way to do it, isn't it?
Well, it's re-indoctrination, but it is essentially a surge. Okay, it's a surge on multiple levels. But you have to look at the second part of John Ladd's comment, which I thought was very telling because he basically said it point blank. He said Republicans. It's really not even Republicans, Casey. It's just, we'll call it, I hate to call them fake Republicans, or it's a business consortium, want cheap labor.
Right.
Including Kevin McCarthy
Right.
in his district in California. It's an agricultural district. Kevin McCarthy went down and did the dog and pony show with congressional delegation. But the reality is that's exactly what it is, a dog and pony show, because if they wanted to shut these borders down, they could have been shut down a long time ago under multiple administrations, Democrat, Republican, as we go. This is good for business for the Republicans, a.k.a. the business community, okay? And this is good for business for the Democrat liberals because they are basically going to essentially ensure that they control the government. Mm-hmm. The fake Republicans don't really care about the government. Here's the point. People, take back the House is a false narrative. They don't care as long as they have cheap labor. It's called money because they get paid off to do one thing and one thing only. Make sure that the labor pool is cheap and that basically they can continue as business as usual. So the Republican Party really, Casey, doesn't give two hoots whether they take back the House, the Senate, or the White House because all they care about is the cheap labor base and the continued globalization of our economy. That's really what it comes down to.
And that's really the eye-opening thing. This isn't just an Arizona or Florida or Texas issue. This happens all over America. And it is a big issue here in Florida as well, by the way. So you have so many states that really want the cheap labor and nobody with a backbone to say we need to make sure that people are entering this country legally.
Well, and that's right. And so, so when I walked away, when I was at the airport, I did a little update saying, hey, we're going to put some videos out. I kind of sat back and said, what country am I living in? I don't even know how to explain it to my international, relations that I've worked with over the world.
Right.
People that have run companies all over the world, global leaders who contact me, and they're like, what is happening? And I said, I don't even know how to explain it. I said, I understand emerging markets, I understand Europe, I understand Asia. I'm not even sure how to explain my own country right now because it's an absolute disaster. The Constitution means nothing. It's been run over. U.S. passport's been run over. U.S. citizenship's been run over. For God's sake, when you can come in as an immigrant and they teach you in person in San Diego, when we've had kids that are out of school for over a year and the teachers volunteer on the spot, we're going to go teach the immigrant kids in San Diego in person in auditoriums, and our own children have been staying home because the teachers unions won't teach them. What do you say to that? Mothers and fathers that pay taxes, that have been working nonstop to keep the house lights
Right.
on. What do you say to them?
What do you say to them? And it's very frightening. If you think about it, this is such an Achilles heel for America. And you think about world powers through time, through history. None of them have survived. And here we're watching the breakdown of our own country. And that's one of the reasons why we started this show is
That's right.
people, we need to wake up. We have to protect our country. And it's time to realize that just because they have an RRD behind their name, it doesn't mean that they're doing the right thing for our country. And we really need to evaluate and know who we're voting for. You just can't vote just for anybody,
Well,
just because they're popular.
Even this morning on the way in, I'm on the WhatsApp group with international folks,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll always, what are you up to these days? And I said, well, I'm working on U.S. politics, and they all kind of roll their eyes and give me
Everybody's tired of
and they're like, well,
politics.
why would you ever put your hands into politics? You're a business guy. You're an international business guy. You're an energy guy. I said, because my country's in trouble. And they say, well, the next question, of course, business people say, well, is there any money in it? I said, there's no money in saving your country. It's a disaster. I'm trying to do it for my son and for my family and for the future. And I'm trying to help the country. There's no money in helping your country. It's about, are you an American? It's not whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, whatever you are, libertarian. It's about Americans. So I think we have to go back to basics, Casey, and say, the parties don't matter. It's about, do you believe in the Constitution? Do you believe in being an American citizen? Do you believe in the rule of law? And if you do, then you get out of bed every day and you fight. If you don't, then you'll either
Accept what's happening.
you'll either become
Don't complain.
corrupted or you'll become just literally checked out and depressed.
Right.
So you have to pick your sides here.
So here's something, KW. You were down on the border. You saw a lot of people just walking right through.
Every day,
President
all day.
Biden wants to have a vaccine passport. So you have to get your COVID shot, your COVID vaccine, and then you have a passport to prove it. So how many of these folks are being tested for COVID?
None.
And do they have vaccine passports?
No.
Or what kind
No.
of proof do
In
we
fact,
have?
I just got a note. We got a note from another follower. Some of their family members work for Homeland Security. They've contracted COVID from the migrants. Okay, because while Americans are being suppressed, oppressed, depressed by the federal government, criminally breaking the law, essentially they're bringing in these migrants, and they're not only not giving them a DNA swab, they're not fingerprinting them, they're not testing them for COVID in many cases. They're just releasing them into the community, and those that go into the centers are transmitting COVID to our Homeland Security, Border Patrol, nurses, doctors trying to take care of them. We've got, we've got veterans sleeping on the street, Casey. I get really upset about this. We got military veterans sleeping on the street. We've got citizens sleeping on the street. Can't get a meal. Can't get any shelter. Can't get medicine. We have veterans that are in chronic intractable pain across this country. Yet we can basically spend hundreds of millions of dollars a day across this country on these migrants. I'm sorry, America first. I'm America first.
You talked about that with John Ladd, how much debt that this is accumulating. And, it's incredibly, incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Jenny Biddle, thank you for tuning in. Children aren't using acetylene torches. Part of the problem is how people such as AOC and Ilhan Omar are elected. We unfortunately have to wait for the liberal Democrats to know they will suffer from the consequences of the liberal policies they happily voted for, not just Republicans, before we can change their minds with the facts. You are correct. It's an American problem.
It is. And, again, my colleagues from International are on us with us live here, and they're reminding us every new body is a strain on our infrastructure and our economy. And they're telling us this because they've experienced it. Okay, wake up, people. This is not just, we need to learn the lessons from around the world, okay? This is not new.
We do. Your friend from Africa, as
Yeah.
a matter of fact, just said, look what's happened when we opened our borders up.
Right.
Things get out of control. And, our president, on one hand, is telling Americans, you've got to wear masks. He wants a mask mandate everywhere. It's up to the states, but he's recommending everybody have a mask mandate. And on the other hand, come on in, everybody from the border. We're not testing you. You don't have to wear a mask and
And you get released
infiltrate our public. And you're released.
And you're released on the spot. And so, think about this, right, Casey? If theoretically any U.S. citizen, gets arrested, they get fingerprinted, documented, everything else.
That's right.
Well, and that's somebody who's just a normal person on the block. Well, you can walk in as a terrorist, okay, and get released, okay, because the Border Patrol doesn't know who's who in a zoo. They don't know who you are.
Right.
You could be, because they're not putting a DNA swab in there, which is basically, a little Q-tip, and they put it in a bag and they send it off to a lab to put it in a database. They're not fingerprinting. They're not taking pictures. They're not interviewing. They're not questioning. I mean, they're basically saying, here's a little piece of paper, and you need to come back in 4 years for a hearing.
Notice
4
hearing.
years. I mean, I want that deal.
We have no idea where they're going to be in these 4 years. And
Right.
let's face it, many of them don't even show up for the
They
hearing.
never show up. None of them show up. Meanwhile, I can take any American. I use Africa as an example because I spent a lot of time there. I could take you to any African nation, and for the most part, they are really rigid about their immigration because they are poor, because they understand if they open up their borders to their other neighbors in Africa, that will destroy their economy, destroy their population, destroy their infrastructure. So South Africa is a great example. The Nigerian gangs, in addition to Mozambique and the Muslim terrorists and all the criminal syndicates, animal poaching is a big issue over there. The Nigerian gangs infiltrated South Africa, and literally millions of them moved in and took over Johannesburg. So if you go to now downtown Johannesburg, which was the old beautiful city, it's a ghetto now. It's basically occupied by illegal, undocumented Nigerians, and the South African government can't do a thing about it because they've almost just kind of walled them off. But they are the drug dealers, they are the prostitution and human traffickers, they are all the bad smugglers, they are the terrorists, in South Africa, and that's what's coming to America, not Nigerians. That model is coming to America, and it's here. And not only that, we're encouraging it. And how can any American, I don't care what your politics are, accept that?
Right. There is a border crisis going on right now, and those that deny it, I don't see how they possibly can. You talk about South Africa, and most of them have populated in Johannesburg. One big difference that occurs to me as you're talking is we are a vast nation. It is very large. There's not going to be one central location.
That's right.
They're going to be everywhere.
Well, they're gonna have enclaves. Just like let's look at the example. Look, I have a lot of friends who are international. I have some great friends that are Somali background, but they're good people. But if you bring in thousands and thousands on a dime and put them in an enclave like Minneapolis, what do you get? You get essentially what they have in Europe, these enclaves, these Muslim enclaves, for example, that don't integrate with society, that basically the mosques teach radicalism,
Right.
and you breed terrorist cells inside your own country. That's the problem with the Netherlands today. That's the problem with Belgium. That's the problem with France. They basically have lost control of their country. If you go to Belgium today, and you look at the elementary school, the majority, and this is a fact, the majority of all the students are Muslim because they basically have taken over. Not that the Muslim religion is a problem; it's the fact that they've taken over the society. Okay, they are basically having 6, 7 kids to every 1 or 2 of the Belgian and the Netherlands kids, but they've taken over the school system, and then they take over the local government, and you have to wonder. Then they wonder how they lost their country. Look at Belgium, look at the Netherlands, look at France. If Americans want to understand how you lose your country, they are the perfect example of how to lose a country by open borders and by not checking terrorism and illegal activity.
Again, this is KC and KW. We are coming to you from South Florida. If you have some topics that you'd like us to discuss, just drop us a line, message us on Facebook. We'd love to do that. We're here to just try and protect America, try to make everybody realize what's going on, that we can't just accept status quo. We have to really pay attention to who we're voting for. We just had President Biden come in, and there's so many different issues we can talk about with President Biden. The executive orders are on day one. Off track here a little bit, but allowing anybody who identifies as a female, even if he's a male, participate in female sports. I mean, there's just so many issues, folks.
Yeah.
This is why it's so important to know who you're voting for.
Well, take an example. I mean, look, we've got a representative in the 18th district here, Brian Mast, who voted for transgender sex changes operations in the military.
Right.
I mean, and then he tried to pretend he didn't vote for it. Nobody makes that mistake, Casey.
Right.
Okay. I mean, if you did, you need to be fired. So let's be clear. I mean, for the folks in Martin, St. Lucie, and Palm Beach counties here, we've got a bad actor in Congress and you keep voting for them.
Right.
People that violate the Second Amendment. He voted against the Second Amendment. The point of the matter is you have to vote for the right person, not the party.
That's right. You
Okay.
absolutely have to. Just because they have an R behind their name does not mean they're necessarily Republican. And the same goes
Exactly.
with Democrats, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Brent Wallenberg, thanks for tuning in. Good to see you. Non-U.S. citizens have the right to bear arms. It's a no-brainer. I think probably what you're saying is they're bringing the arms in.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. Obama, Biden gave them the arms. Look, remember? Fast and Furious?
That's right.
Thousands
That's right.
and thousands of high-powered weapons were given to the drug cartels by
right.
Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Eric Holder. So where do you think those arms are today? They're sitting on the other side of the Mexican border, and they're coming in with the drug dealers and all of the bad actors, and they've basically infiltrated Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, and California. And these are automatic weapons, Casey. These are not pistols.
Right.
These are bad weapons. Oh, by the way, they want to ban weapons now from U.S. citizens, semi-automatic weapons, long rifles, to protect yourself. So they give the drug dealers weapons, and they want to tell the American people you can't protect yourself. I don't think that sits very well down on the border with the Patriots.
No, it doesn't. And that is our Second Amendment. You just hit the nail on the head there. If we don't protect our right to bear arms, we're going to be sitting ducks. We are a citizen nation, citizen army nation. Our right to bear arms is what our forefathers set in place to make sure we do protect ourselves.
That's right. Well, Arizona is an open carry state, I don't think unless California literally invades Arizona, I don't think that's ever going to change. Texas
Right.
is an open carry state, but they're trying to change that, and they're trying to basically remove. It's think about what's happening, right? They want you to have a DNA passport. They want you to have the vaccine passport is really a DNA passport. Okay?
Oh, the vaccine passport. There's going to be times. A matter of fact, Dr. Wolf came on and said other functionalities will be loaded onto the platform, like your PayPal account, geolocation, credit history, medical history. That's going to enable that. They might not
That's
do
right.
it day one, but who knows what they're going to do a year from now.
It's a slippery slope. You open
a
that
very
door,
slippery
you
slope.
can't stop. Just like you set up a database on for red flag laws with the Second Amendment. Once you set up that protocol, all they do is just keep pushing that door open. I've seen it in business my whole life. You cannot give an inch, because you give an inch, you lose a mile. Okay.
Yes.
So when it comes to what's happening, okay, think about this, right? We're arming the drug dealers, we're arming the bad actors, and we're saying at the same time, as American citizens, you're not entitled to have any weapons under your Second Amendment to protect yourself. But meanwhile, the drug dealers can come in and have all the weapons, have all the drugs, have billions of dollars of technology, and invade your country, invade your backyard, but you can't do anything about it. Oh, and by the way, if you shoot a drug dealer, you're probably going to go to jail.
Right. Exactly. You're the one that's going to
Yeah,
be
you're
at
going to get
fault.
arrested.
Tony Stevens, it is always good to see you. I appreciate you tuning in from the UK. And yes, I started laughing when I saw your note. Brent Wallenberg, 911 was a good example of non-U.S. citizens weaponizing our own jets and using them against us. Boy,
Yep.
are you right about that, Brent.
Yep.
And, it's frightening. I talked about this last week as well, but we have the Florida East Coast Railway train. It's actually Grupo Mexico now train that goes right through South Florida. We have over 6 million people here, and this train track goes right through, and they want to transport LNG, a very highly explosive.
Yeah, bad idea.
A
Bad
very
idea.
bad idea, and
Yeah.
how easy it is for terrorists to be able to attack something like that. So they're always going to be thinking of ways to use what we have here in the United States against us, and letting them in the borders. We're making it pretty easy for them.
Well, next week, Chair Casey will show a smaller clip of, essentially a natural gas compression station that was on the border that we did a video on. And basically, I walked right up to it. It was unprotected. It was a mainline natural gas transmission between Mexico, Arizona, and the Southwest. And, I know infrastructure, but if I was a bad actor, I could have taken it out and disrupted the entire Southwest in Mexico's, natural gas import-export model.
Right.
And that's the point. They're coming after our infrastructure. The two things we have to worry about in this country from a terrorist perspective are the humanitarian targets, which are basically buildings with people, but more importantly, our infrastructure. Because if you don't understand that terrorists are going to attack our infrastructure, but more importantly, we have our own federal government trying to shut our infrastructure down. Pipelines are our lifeline. Oil and gas pipelines keep this country going. It keeps our chemical plants going. It keeps our industrial plants going. It keeps our power plants going, Casey. We're our natural gas power plants. If we don't have transportation and distribution of natural gas,
Right.
we cannot run our country. And we have to become dependent on what? Imports. And that's what Joe Biden, the Kamala Harris, and the liberal leftist folks want to do. They want to bring us back to import dependency and volatility. They're purposely attacking two things: our energy infrastructure and our food sources. Who owns all of our food processing plants now? China. Who owns all of our farmland now?
China's, they're buying
Okay,
up a
so
lot of
people need to
farmland.
wake up.
That's another good topic.
People need to wake up.
Let's talk about that more next week. We're at
Yeah.
the end of our hour here this week, KW, and it's been a really good conversation. Again, thank you for going out to Arizona these last couple weeks. Diana McDonald, she says, amen. It's an American problem. The swamp still needs to be drained regardless of which side of the aisle one sits on. Couldn't agree with you more, Diana. And, next week, let's talk a little bit more about our infrastructure. I think that's a really good topic.
Absolutely.
Especially
Yeah.
with President Biden. He has an infrastructure plan where he wants to raise business taxes again to the highest in the world. So
Well, Casey, let's give by a little taste, right? What that's going to be is two things. It's going to be an infrastructure spending plan on paper, but what it really is a massive tax.
it's a massive tax on our businesses, and it's going to
That's
chase
right.
them out of the country again. Now that Trump was bringing
By
back our
design.
businesses, our manufacturing businesses back, and now it's the highest in the world, folks, that he's proposing. So what are our businesses
It's called
supposed
the
to do?
globalist agenda, Casey.
Globalist agenda. There
Run
you
them
go.
offshore again.
So KC and KW, we're going to sign off now. Again, we're coming to you from Stuart, Florida. We're just off the banks of the St. Lucie River. One of these days, maybe we can go and broadcast from there if we can control the wind a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be a pretty backdrop.
We need our technology guys with us.
So we're here every Thursday, 10 a.m. We're on YouTube and Facebook Live. So tune in again next Thursday. Again, any topics you want to cover, drop us a line. We'll talk about it. Thanks for tuning in. Next week.